Every night at 10:15 I heard the same sound through the wall. A click. Small, metal, final, Elena's bedroom lock. You learn the sounds of an old house the way you learn a person slowly, then all at once. The radiator that ticked when it was thinking about working. The third stair that complained if you put your weight on the left side. The back door that swelled shut every time it rained, which in Portland is most of the time. And Elena's lock, 10:15, regular as the harbor bell, 11 months running. I never mentioned it. Some sounds aren't invitations. We'd taped a spare key to her room inside the kitchen cabinet, above the mugs, the week she moved in. She'd put it in a cream envelope and sealed it with a strip of blue painter's tape because that was the only tape in the junk drawer, and she'd written across the front in her careful teacher's hand for actual emergencies only. I added emergency key above it, because I'm the kind of man who labels things. Then she'd turned to me in the kitchen, dish towel still in her hands, and said, "I need you to know I mean that." "I do," I said. "No, I need you to know I really mean it." So I dried my hands and faced her properly, because she deserved that. I won't open it unless the house is on fire, or you ask me to, or it's something where waiting would get you hurt. Otherwise it sits there. She studied me for a second, the way she studied a kid deciding whether to trust a hard book. Then she nodded, and something in her shoulders came down half an inch, and I understood I'd passed a test I hadn't known the rules of. For 11 months, that envelope sat in the cabinet and I never touched it. I want that on the record, because of what came later. My name's Owen Mercer. I was 34, a commercial electrician, living in a gray-blue two-story on Munjoy Hill that the salt air had been chewing on for 60 years. The porch tilted toward the street. The upstairs windows rattled in a hard wind. I'd moved in alone after a woman named Rachel left me, and on her way out she told me I was useful in every possible way except the one that would have mattered. I was holding a cabinet door at the time. I'd fixed the hinge for her 2 days earlier. I never did fix the other thing. That's the whole pattern of me. I find the broken thing with screws in it, and I leave the broken thing with feelings attached. The rent was too high for one person, so I put up a listing. Quiet house, separate bedrooms, no parties, must be okay with old radiators. Elena answered, "I teach second graders to love books. Old radiators don't scare me. Parties do." We met at a coffee shop on Congress on a rainy Sunday. She was 32, brown hair to her shoulders, a calm face, and a way of looking at you that made you feel she'd heard the part of the sentence you decided not to say. She shook my hand like someone who'd learned to be polite in rooms where she didn't quite feel safe. There was a thin, pale line on her left ring finger where a ring used to be. I pretended not to see it. She pretended not to see me pretending. That was our first agreement, and we kept it better than most. We covered rent, parking, heat, overnight guests. Then she said, plain, eyes steady, and I lock my bedroom door at night. Most people would have asked why. I could feel the question in my mouth. But the way she said it told me the answer wasn't on the table. "Okay," I said. She looked almost surprised. "That's not a problem?" "No, some people think it's strange. Some people are strange." The corner of her mouth moved, not a smile, close enough. She moved in the next Saturday. Everything she owned fit in a small U-Haul in the back seat of her car books, 2 lamps. A white dresser with chipped handles, kitchen boxes labeled in careful marker, and 1 cedar box about the size of a shoebox, dark metal clasp, a scratch across the lid, that she carried herself. I reached for it out of habit. "No," she said. Quick, not rude. "Final, okay," I said, and picked up a box marked mugs/fragile/seriously instead. That's how it went for a while. We weren't friends at first. We were roommates, which is a different thing. Friends ask about your day. Roommates ask if the dishwasher's clean or dirty. We had separate shelves in the fridge. Mine was eggs and takeout and whatever vegetable I'd bought with good intentions and found later in a state of moral collapse. Hers was yogurt and soups in glass jars and little stacks of sliced oranges she carried to school for kids who forgot snacks. And then, slowly, without either of us deciding to. The lines started to blur in the small ways. I'd come down at 6 and the coffee would already be made. The first time I figured she'd made too much. The second time there were 2 clean mugs by the machine. The third time mine had a sticky note on it, "You drink coffee like you're trying to scare it." This may help. She'd bought a darker roast. I didn't thank her. I bought the oat milk she liked and put it on her shelf. She didn't thank me either. That was how we talked through groceries, through a thermostat nudged a degree warmer on nights she came home with her shoulders up around her ears, through a porch light left on when I worked late. No names on any of it. No pressure. Safe. In January, an ice storm turned the front steps into a lawsuit, and I came home to find her sitting on the bottom stair with one boot off, trying not to cry. My whole body moved before my brain did. I crouched in front of her, and she flinched, that small measuring pause, and I sat back on my heels and held up both hands. "You can say no." She looked at me a long second. "Okay," she said. It was a sprain, not a break. I iced it, salted the steps twice, and fixed the loose board she'd tripped on. The next morning there was a note on my travel mug. "Thank you for not making a production of it." And under it, smaller, I noticed the board. I kept that note in my truck for 6 weeks. I'm not proud of that. It's just true. By the time the days started getting longer, we were eating dinner together 2 or 3 nights a week, neither of us ever once saying out loud that we were doing it. It just happened that one of us would make too much, and the other would be in the kitchen, and the table was right there. She'd grade reading assessments while I ate. Because apparently a teacher's idea of unwinding is more work in a different chair, and she'd tell me about her kids. There was a boy named Mateo who'd decided books were a punishment until she made him a bookmark with a great white shark on it and told him sharks were just rough drafts the ocean kept editing. There was a girl named Harper who read under her desk when the room got too loud. And Elena let her, because she said a kid who finds her own quiet corner is a kid who's going to be all right. There was a little one named Darius who asked her once if grown-ups ever got scared of hard words. "What'd you tell him?" I asked. I said adults are scared of all kinds of things. They just get better at blaming traffic. I laughed, the real kind. The kind that gets away from you, and she looked pleased in a small, careful way, and I filed that away as a thing to be very stupid about later. Because that was the part that started to get dangerous, not the coffee or the porch light. The sound of her being pleased. The way she'd argue with a documentary, or line up her pens before she started grading, or hum something under her breath when she thought the house was empty. A person can keep all the right distances and still find themselves listening for a hum. The thing about living with someone careful is you become careful back. Not cautious careful. I learned not to stand too close behind her at the counter. I learned that if she went quiet, the worst thing I could do was fill it with questions because I was uncomfortable, and I learned to notice things and do nothing with them, which I told myself was respect. I noticed she touched the cedar box every time she cleaned, moving it from under the bed to the desk and back, never opening it. I noticed she walked out to the freezing back porch every time her mother called. And one night in February, I noticed apartment listings on her laptop, 1 bedrooms near her school, small and expensive and alone, and she closed it too fast when I came in, and I said nothing, because saying something would have meant admitting I cared what she decided. That's the lie men like me tell. We call our silence respect right up until it turns into cowardice. And we never quite catch the moment it changes. The lease renewal came through the mail slot on a Monday, rent up $150, a sticky note that said need answer by Friday. Sorry, economy. No shame in the man at all. I put it on the kitchen table. Elena came home, saw it, stopped with her hand still on her bag strap. Lease came, I said. I see that. Rent's up. Of course it is. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She just nodded and went upstairs, and at 10:15 I heard the click, and the next morning the listings were back on her laptop, and this time she didn't close it fast enough. I saw the cursor sitting on one. Apply. I said nothing. Again, the storm came Thursday. Every station said the same thing in a different voice. High winds, coastal flooding, power outages, stay inside. They closed my job site early because nobody wants electricians on ladders in a 60-mile-an-hour gust, which I considered management's finest decision of the year. I came home with batteries, water, and a loaf of cinnamon raisin bread because the plane was gone. Elena was already there, filling pots at the sink, school let out early. "You got the dessert bread," she said. It was the last loaf. Civilization has limits. That's not preparation. That's a tantrum with raisins. By midnight, she'd eaten 2 slices, but that was later. First, we worked the house. I checked the sump pump. She charged the power banks. I brought in the porch chairs, and we argued about the old maple on the east side, whether it was close enough to the house to matter. She said yes. I said probably not. The storm took her side. The power held, flickering, until 11:38, when the house dropped into full dark with a soft electric sigh, the radiator going quiet, the fridge winding down, the wind suddenly the only thing in the world. I lit the lantern and started up the stairs to check for leaks. That's when the house cracked. Not thunder. Wood, a long splitting sound from the east side, and then glass breaking upstairs, and then Elena's voice, not words, just a sharp sound a person makes when something's gone wrong fast. I took the stairs 3 at a time. Rain was coming under her door in a thin sheet across the hall floor, which is a thing you never want to see inside a house. "Elena, I'm okay," her voice was tight. "The window, are you hurt?" "No, I don't think so." "Open the door." The knob rattled from the inside and didn't turn. It won't move. The old frame had swollen, or the limb had shoved the wall a half-inch, and the door was jammed solid. I stood in the dark hall, with rain misting through the gap, and my mind went straight down the stairs to the kitchen cabinet. The envelope. The key. For actual emergencies only. This was one. There was no argument to have with myself about it. "I'm getting the key," I said, and turned for the stairs. "No." The word came through the door hard enough to stop me. I came back. "Elena, there's broken glass and the rain's coming in. I need to get you out. I can try the latch again." "The frame's jammed. I have the key right downstairs." A pause. Short, but I heard it, and I understood it. And it changed everything about the next 10 minutes. She wasn't being stubborn. She was deciding whether to let a man come through her locked door in the dark with a key she'd been afraid of needing for 11 months, or whether to find another way. "Give me a minute," she said. Every practical cell in my body hated it. The water, the glass, the cold. But the practical thing and the right thing had split apart, and I'd made a promise about which one I'd follow. So I knelt by the door and I said, "Tell me what you want me to do." "There's a screwdriver in the hall drawer." "Flathead." That's my line. "Owen." I got the flathead and passed it under the door as far as it would go, and on the other side I heard her get down on the floor and start working the latch. Her breath, the metal scraping, the wind screaming through her broken window. A minute. 2. Then the bolt shifted and the door gave 6 inches and stuck. And there she was on the other side, barefoot, soaked through the shoulders, hair plastered to her face, and behind her the room was chaos, a thick maple limb punched through the top of the window, glass across the floor catching the lantern light, the curtains snapping like flags. The cedar box on the floor by the bed with one corner already dark with water. She looked at me, not embarrassed, not calm, right at the edge of holding it together. "I need help," she said. That was all. 3 words from a woman who'd spent 11 months making sure she never had to say them. "Okay," I said. We moved fast. I put my boots on her feet because of the glass too big, but better than bare, and got the tarp and the roll of plastic sheeting from the basement. We shoved the limb back as far as we dared without making the window worse. Stapled plastic across the frame. Jammed towels along the sill. The rug was already a sponge. The books by the window had swollen shut. She kept going back to the cedar box. "Let me carry it," I said. She froze. I held both hands up where she could see them. "Closed. I'll carry it closed." She looked at the box, then the window, then me. "Okay," she said. One word. A bigger key than the one in the kitchen. I carried it out closed and set it in the hall, and when the worst was contained, she stood in the middle of her ruined room in my boots, holding a wet towel, and I watched something move across her face that was worse than panic. It was recognition. She'd lost the room before she'd finished deciding whether to leave it. "You can't sleep in here," I said. "I know. Take my room. It's dry." "No. The couch, then." "I'll take the recliner." She wanted to argue. I could see it, but exhaustion beat pride by a hair. "Couch," she said. I made tea on the camping stove I keep for outages, and she looked at me like I'd been waiting my whole life for the power grid to fail, and I told her I owned the stove for work, which was a lie, and she almost smiled, which felt like winning something I hadn't earned yet. We set up in the living room, the lantern between us, the cedar box on the coffee table, closed, one corner stained dark. For a while, we just listened to the storm work the windows. Then she said, "To the room more than to me, I almost used the key." I waited. "I almost told you to use it. And then I couldn't." She touched the edge of the box. "That's why I'm telling you this. So you understand it wasn't about you." I didn't move. "I had a fiancé," she said. "Nathan, he wasn't a monster." That's always the first thing I say, like I have to prove I had a reason to leave. "He was charming, good with my parents, good at making things sound reasonable." Her fingers found the clasp on the box and didn't open it. We moved in together, and everything became ours. Our apartment, our schedule, our future. It sounded romantic right up until I realized nothing was mine. Not a drawer. Not a bad mood. Not a night I wanted to be alone behind a closed door. Story Cux 25b. The wind threw rain at the glass like gravel. "He never broke anything down," she said. "He never yelled. He just made every boundary sound like an accusation. If I locked the bathroom, he'd laugh and ask what I was hiding. If I wanted an evening to myself, he'd say couples don't need walls. If I went quiet, he'd tell me communication mattered, which meant I had to perform being okay on his clock." She swallowed. By the end, I didn't have a single room in my own life I could close. I'd sit in my car in parking lots just to have somewhere he couldn't follow the conversation into. That's a strange thing to realize about your own apartment, that the only door that locks is the one on your car. She turned the cedar box a quarter inch on the table, the way she did when her hands needed somewhere to go. "So after I got out, I locked doors. Not because every man scares me. Because the lock was proof that one small line still belonged to me. That's all it ever was. One line. Mine. I thought about all those 10-15 clicks I'd told myself not to wonder about. Not fear of me. Not even distrust. Exactly. Just proof. Renewed nightly, that one thing in the world was still hers. "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be. You never pushed. I wanted to ask sometimes." "I know." She looked at me then. Really looked. "You think you hide because you don't say things. But you say plenty without words. You just make yourself useful so nobody gets close enough to want the rest of you." That landed somewhere old. "Rachel said something like that," I said. Useful but unreachable. What happened with her? I could have given the short version. We wanted different things. Instead, because Elena had opened a door first, I told the truth. She wanted me to let her in. I thought I had. I fixed everything she asked me to fix: her car, her shelves, her dad's porch light. I showed up. I handled things. I thought that was the same as being known. I turned the cold mug in my hands. She said I made myself useful so I'd never have to be reached. She was right. It just took me a couple years to stop arguing with it. Elena was quiet a while. Then she said, low, So we're the same animal. You hide by fixing, I hide by locking. Yeah, I said. Pretty much. Around 3 the wind eased, and she finally slept on the couch with one hand under her cheek and my wool socks too big on her feet. I stayed up in the recliner, not sleeping much, listening to the house survive. By morning the storm had gone east and left Portland gray and bruised. Her room was worse in daylight glass, soaked rug, books warped open, the plastic barely holding. We cleaned all day. I called the landlord 3 times and got voicemail twice and an excuse once. I boarded the window from outside. She sorted books into salvage and ruin, and partway through she went very still over a thin paperback with a water-bloated spine, and I saw it was one a kid must have given her, a name written inside the cover in the enormous careful letters of someone just learning to make them. She set it in the salvage pile even though it was finished. I didn't say anything. Some things you keep because of whose hands made the marks. I got the latch working enough to close the door, but the lock itself was finished. The mechanism bent where the frame had shoved it, and when I told her that, her face went flat and careful. I can replace it, I said quickly. Better one even. Tomorrow. Okay, she said. Not relieved. Just okay. The next day I found the application. Not snooping, we were carrying damp papers from her desk to dry on the kitchen table, and a folded packet slid out and landed face up. 1-bedroom rental application, South Portland. A sticky note on top in her hand. Move before it gets harder. She saw me see it. The kitchen went still. I was going to tell you, she said. When? I don't know. I handed it back without reading more. Lease is due Friday. I know. I wanted to ask if it was me. I sat down across from her at the table instead, the wet papers curling under their mugs between us, and I made myself say the first true thing instead of the easy one. I don't want you to leave. Her eyes came up. But I don't want it the wrong way. I don't want to ask you to stay because I'm scared of how quiet this house gets without you in it. Would it be quiet? It would be awful. I looked around the kitchen, her oranges by the sink, her blue mug, the kids' books stacked on a chair. But that can't be your reason. You started looking before the lease even came. I wasn't unhappy here, she said. That makes it more confusing, not less. She was quiet. Then I started feeling safe. Not comfortable. Safe, she laughed, wet and small. Which sounds like a good thing, until your body remembers the last time safe turned into someone else's permission. So I figured I'd leave before I found out which kind of safe you were. I understood it then. Not all the way. Enough. You were going to go before I could become dangerous, I said. I know that's not fair to you. No, it's just protective. It came from somewhere real. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. I hate that the storm made all of this visible. I don't, I said. On Monday I replaced her lock, the best one the hardware store had that fit the old door, solid brass, 2 keys. She stood in the hall and watched every step. I've installed a few hundred locks in my life, in office buildings and server rooms and the back doors of restaurants, and I've never once thought about what the thing was for beyond keeping the wrong people out. Kneeling in that hallway with her watching, I thought about it the whole time. A lock is just a small machine that lets a person decide. That's all it does. It doesn't keep anyone safe. Not really. A determined man and a pry bar end that argument fast. What it gives you is the decision. The yes or the no, made by you, on your side of the door. I'd spent 11 months listening to her make that decision at 10:15 every night and telling myself it had nothing to do with me. And only now, with the brass cold in my hands, did I understand I'd been wrong. It had everything to do with me. It just hadn't been about me, which is a different thing, and the difference was the whole point. When I was done, I tested it once, set both keys in her palm, and stepped back. "You don't want one?" she said. I shook my head. The envelope's still in the kitchen. That key's old. It won't fit this lock. I know. She looked at the 2 new keys in her hand and understood before I said it. You want me to decide. I want you to decide. About the lock, about the lease, about all of it. Not because your room flooded, and not because I fixed the door. I don't want anything from you that the storm picked for you. That night at 10:15, I sat in my room with a book I wasn't reading, and across the hall I heard the click. Locked. And it hurt, and it was also exactly right, because a door someone gives up under pressure isn't trust, it's just a quieter kind of losing. I let out the breath I'd been holding and went to sleep. Friday came. Lease day. The house was mostly back together, temporary glass in the window. The rug gone, 2 books ruined. The cedar box with a faint water stain it would keep forever. She'd opened it 2 nights before, at the kitchen table, not all the way, enough, her grandmother's recipe cards. A stack of letters tied with ribbon, 1 photo from the engagement, folded backwards so the picture faced in. A little brass bookmark shaped like a bird. She didn't explain every piece, and I didn't ask for more than she set out, which was the thing we were learning how to do. I came home from work to find both papers side by side on the table, the apartment application and the lease, and Elena standing at the window watching the street shine after the rain. I called the apartment manager, she said. My stomach dropped. I kept my face still. Okay, I told her I'm not taking it. She turned around. And then I sat in my car outside the school for 20 minutes and made myself answer one question honestly. Whether I was saying no because I'm too scared to leave, or because I actually want to stay. And I want to stay. She said it carefully, setting each word where it belonged. Not because of the storm. Not because you're safe and I'm tired, although you are, and I am, and I'll take both as evidence. A breath. I want to stay because this place is mine too. It took a tree through my window to make me admit it, but it was true before the tree. Good, I said. That's all you've got? Good? If I say more right now, I'll embarrass us both. She laughed and picked up the pen and signed her name. Then she slid it across the table, and I signed mine under it. 2 names, 1 old house, no promise past a year on paper, and somehow more than either of us had walked in expecting to survive. That night she took the old envelope down from the cabinet. The blue tape came off with a dry little rip. She slid the dead key into her palm, held it a second, then took a fresh white envelope from the drawer and put one of the new keys inside and sealed it and wrote across the front, "For emergencies." She paused. I stayed on my side of the kitchen, giving her room, watching every second of it. Then she added a second line and taped it back inside the cabinet in the same spot and turned around. "This doesn't mean you can use it whenever," she said. I know. It doesn't mean I'll stop locking the door. I know. It doesn't mean I'm not still scared. I know. But it means something. Yeah, I said. It does. I didn't read the second line until she'd gone upstairs, and for the nights I decide to let you in. I didn't kiss her that night, though I wanted to. The moment was already full, and some things grow better before you name them. We didn't fall into the rest of it all at once. Real life is slower than people want it to be. She kept locking her door most nights through the spring. I never kept count, because turning healing into a scoreboard would have ruined it, and the first night she didn't, I sat in the living room afterwards, staring at the ceiling like a man who'd forgotten how to be normal. In the morning she looked at me over her coffee and said, "You noticed," and I said yes, and she said, "Don't make it weird." And I said I would never, and we both knew that was a lie, and we laughed, and that was its own kind of door. Spring comes slow in Maine. It sends one good day and takes it back, apologizes with a week of mud, then finally remembers leaves. We moved at about that speed. In April, we went to the farmer's market on a Saturday because she wanted early greens, and the crowd pushed us close on the sidewalk, and she took my arm, and neither of us said a word about it, and we walked the rest of the block like that, like it was nothing, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. In May, I drove out to her school fundraiser and carried folding tables, and a teacher asked if I was Elena's boyfriend. Elena looked at me. I looked at her. She said, "He's Owen," and the teacher nodded like that answered it, and somehow it did, for then. We were building the thing on purpose, plank by plank, the way you'd shore up an old house slowly, where it could hold the weight. It was June before she kissed me, on the back porch, after I'd fixed the loose railing for the third time and said the landlord should be legally barred from owning tools. She touched my sleeve and said, "Come here." And I did. It was soft and quiet and nothing at all like a storm, and that was the whole point. The first real thing between us didn't come out of fear or a broken window or a flooded room. It came on an ordinary evening, both of us on dry ground. Her choosing to close the distance because she wanted to. The envelope's still in the cabinet. I've never used it. The point was never that I could. The next winter, another storm came through, smaller, but enough to rattle the glass and knock the sleep loose from the house. I woke around 2 to rain on the windows and the wind working the corners, and for 1 second I was back in that hallway, the broken window, her voice through a jammed door. Then I heard it. Across the hall. A click. Not locking, opening, footsteps crossed the floor, and a soft knock came on my door, not urgent, not afraid, just there. I opened it, and Elena stood in the hall in an old sweatshirt, hair loose, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Couldn't sleep," she said. "Storm?" She shook her head. "No, just wanted company." I stepped back, and she came in, and we sat on the edge of the bed with the coffee going cold between us while the weather moved over Portland and the radiators ticked behind the wall. No emergency, no broken window, nothing forcing her hand. Just a knock she didn't have to make, on a night she could have spent behind a locked door, by a woman who finally knew that wanting the company wouldn't cost her the right to leave. She leaned into my shoulder. I rested my cheek against her hair. Outside, the rain kept on, softer now, the kind that sounds like the house being looked after instead of tested. Downstairs, in the cabinet above the mugs, the envelope waited where it always did for emergencies, and for the nights she chose to open the door herself. I never did use it. Not that winter, not any winter after. It just stayed there, sealed, while across the years the clicks at 10:15 came less and less, until one spring I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard one. I didn't mention it. Some things you only get to keep by not keeping count.